During the week, you may have seen, as I did myself, photographs of a wax model of Sinead O'Connor that was commissioned, I suppose is the word, for the Wax Museum. It was unveiled to coincide with the first anniversary of her death, God rest her. It wasn't good. People weren't happy with it. Her family hadn't seen it until it was unveiled. They weren't particularly happy with it. And yet the artist, I suppose, whoever he or she was, tried the best they could to capture a moment in Sinead's life. But in all honesty, it wasn't good. And the Wax Museum withdrew it yesterday, just 2 days or so after it was unveiled, saying they could do better and will do better. Why am I bringing that to the Mass tonight? The representation they had of Sinead was probably one of the first ones many of us remember from that song, Nothing Compares to You. The bald-headed girl, which was unusual at the time. It's very fashionable now. It was unusual at the time to see a girl bald without being sick. And her eyes, I think, were amazing. And that was what I noticed people commenting on, that her eyes weren't in this model. They weren't to be seen. Her beauty wasn't. But I think what the artist was trying to do is trying to capture a moment that all of us could identify with. This young girl, bald, with an amazing, amazing voice. Whatever happened in Sinead's life, she was someone I often wished I could have met. Loved to have just talked to her to see what was going on, because she had such an amazing talent. And that's, I think, what the man was trying to capture. And that's what he was trying to put before people, but it didn't altogether work. And yet, he was dead right. Because that's where we need to go back to in life, to the very best of us, the very best moment of us. And I think if the boy in this gospel story was been immortalized in wax, no matter how old he lived to be when he died, if the artist was to do him justice, he'd have to find the small boy in the crowd who held up the 5 loaves and the 2 fish, because that was perfection. That was his nothing compares to you moment. And we all have a moment like that. When we got it right, we've got lots of moments wrong, every one of us. But there are moments in life we've got right. When we said the right thing, did the right thing, were the right thing. And they're the moments that we need to hold on to and try to come back to. So as I said, I think the artist was certainly gone down the right track in the piece of Sinead he wanted to record. Not the woman with the Sacred Heart tattooed on her chest. Not the woman wearing the clerical collar. Not the woman dressed as a Muslim. All the transformations she went through in life, all that searching. But the iconic moment was the young girl and just her face singing Nothing Compares to You. Do you know how that song begins? It's been 7 hours and 15 days since you took your love away from me. I'm often struck by that. How she could pinpoint in the song, or Prince, who wrote it, could pinpoint 7 hours and 15 days since you took your love away from me. That was the moment that the song came from. Could the Lord say that of any of us this evening? It's been 7 hours and 15 days since you took your love away from me. It's been 10 years, it's been 15 years, it's been 20 years since you darkened the door of a church. I know you're darkening it now, and I'm not saying that, but you know what I'm trying to say, that we can withdraw our love from God, though he never withdraws his love from us. We can withdraw our love from other people. Other people might withdraw their love from us. And it's a painful place to be. And that's where the song came from. 7 hours. 7 hours and 15 days since you took your love away. Don't let anyone be able to say that about you or me. Let us never withdraw our love from anyone, because there are people depending on us for it. There are people depending on us for it. And as I said, if that little boy were to be immortalized, no matter how old he lived when he died, the moment to go back to is the small boy in the middle of 5,000 people who held up 5 loaves and 2 fish and said, I have something to give you, Jesus. I have something to offer here. We all have that 5 loaves and 2 fish to offer. We all have something to give. Let us not be afraid to give it. And to finish, I'd like to read to you lines that I put on the front of this week's newsletter. They're lines I wrote back in 2011 at my father's funeral. A reflection for after communion time. As I was walking into the church in Clonlua, I met a cousin of mine from Mullingar, and I handed him the piece of paper and I said, would you mind to read that for me? I had mentioned to him about doing a reflection, but he didn't know what the reflection was. I just handed him the piece of paper, and he read it after communion, and he read it exactly as I'd love to have it read. I wrote it about my father in the context of this gospel, because my father was a man who shared. If you went into our house at home, you never could leave without tea. And if my father took the loaf out of the press, he tipped out the whole loaf on a plate in the middle of the table, lest you think there wasn't enough. That's my memory of him. Lest you thought there wasn't enough. They asked me why I did it. The truth is, I don't know. It just seemed the right thing to do. We've been standing there for hours. He had spoken so much and he had said so much, time just went by. People were hungry. You could see it in them, and yet nobody wanted to leave. There was a muttering through the crowd. He wants to feed us. With what? Someone said. There's no food here. That's when I heard myself saying, I have something. My voice seemed so loud. I was only a child, but my voice rose above all others. I have something. A man asked what I had, and I said 5 loaves and 2 fish. He smiled. I suppose now I'd think it was a dismissive smile, but that day I thought he was pleased. He passed on the message. There's a small boy here with 5 loaves and 2 fish. My heart sank when he added, what's that between so many? I blushed, and even with my childish counting of 2 and 2 making 4, I could see he was right. The man who had been talking to us did not agree. Bring it to me, he said. And they took my food. I'll never know how it happened, but the feeding began. Bread and fish to feed 5,000. Why did you do it? I've often thought about that. I did it because my father would have done it. He was always sharing bread with people at home. I grew up seeing him doing that. Truth be told, it was he who would give me the few loaves and fish before I left the house. I did it because he'd have done it. It was the right thing to do. There's nothing to beat a father's good example. Thanks, Bill. We will not forget.